Hi guys, so I really want to talk about a case with you that illustrates getting back to the HPA axis. What I like about this case is the fact that it illustrates how the HPA axis is really related to other systems in the body. And honestly, when we're trying to treat HPA axis dysfunction, we have to look at it holistically. We can't, pardon the cliche, look at the forest and lose the forest, the picture of the forest for the trees, right? We have to try to back away and see the whole. And that, I think, so this case, I think the reason that I was able to help this patient is because of that piece. Naturopathic medicine looks at things holistically, not in little pieces. And this patient had been to, all the big guns, and the big guns, Mayo, right? These guys couldn't help, not because, not for lack of skill, in my opinion. I think they're really good at their specialties. They're really good at looking at this little slice of the pie. But when it comes to trying to back away and put it all together, that's not really happening in conventional medicine, which is why I think a lot of times naturopathic medicine has so much to offer on that front. Because that is the underlying philosophy, really, of naturopathic medicine, is that these things are all interrelated. So this case comes to me, patient with a blood disorder. She basically has no innate immune system. Now, what does that mean? Her white blood cells, and specifically the most prominent kind in the body at any given point, are the neutrophils. The neutrophils are kind of generic polymorphic cells that are going to be the first responders. They're going to recognize, this is a little off right here, so let's get in there. And if you don't have the first responders, then it's kind of hard to get any other response going, right? So they're really essential to even further immune responses. And so if you have no neutrophils, Houston, we have a problem, right? This patient has neutrophil counts, a 10-year history of this, no less, around 200 to 300. Okay, let me give you the general range. So I think LabCorp's numbers are 14 or 1500 to 8,000, 6,000, 8,000, right? Some of the other labs, you'll see higher numbers, like they say below 2,000 is bad, right? Okay, we're not just slightly low. We're hovering at 200 to 300, such that the hematologist has told the patient, I've got these 3 antibiotics that are still working for you. And so you need to make sure you've kind of said goodbyes to your family. I know you're only 60, but some kind of bacterial infection that you're going to get exposed to is going to take you out. Therefore, I need you to not eat fresh vegetables because, gosh darn it, you can get exposed by the spinach leaves at the salad bar to some kind of bacterial infection. I mean, this is true. What I'm telling you is true. You can get exposed, but if you have an immune response, meaning you have some neutrophils in your body, you may not even know you were exposed to something. I mean, maybe you have a touch of diarrhea for a day, or you're like, that didn't sit so well. But mostly, you may not even know, right? My patient's going to die from being exposed to something at the salad bar. Therefore, only eat frozen and only eat canned vegetables. Oh, right. So this patient comes to me, and basically the severity of the case is pretty intense, right? The fatigue is on par with somebody you'd see with like end-stage cancer, no energy, right? There's an hour in the morning when she wakes up where she might be able to get something done. But after that, she needs to lay down. She's exhausted and pretty much can't out of commission for the rest of the day. But hoping that it won't sabotage her sleep, because she only sleeps an hour to 2 at night, if that. Certainly not long stretches of things. And there's a restlessness and the pain and the tinnitus, and everything keeps her awake. And that, how long has that been going on? Kind of as long as I can remember this disease. I know that happens at some blood level of, with the neutrophils at a certain count, but I can't remember where. So 10 years. Pretty much not sleeping. Okay. Headaches, heaviness on the head, body pain when laying down. The pain might keep her from sleeping as well. Okay. Immune system in the toilet, right? So I basically ended up taking her case. And what she told me, right, the physical stuff, okay, that's interesting. But what was most interesting in her case, and therefore most connected to the form of treatment I was going to do, which is called homeopathy, but that's sort of an aside, was the fact that there was no cause. Let me put that in quotes. There was no cause looking through this lens, right? We can't identify a cancer she had where she had chemotherapeutics afterwards, right? She's never had cancer. We can't identify an autoimmune thing because our autoimmune markers are all normal. We can't, this is why they'd labeled it idiopathic, right? This is chronic idiopathic neutropenia. And there really isn't, we can't find a treatment for this. We've had some drug trials, and she participated in one of them, and they stopped it when the majority of people, except my patient, came down with cancer. And they were like, well, that's kind of too big of a side effect to have with this drug, so let's stop. So my patient basically then said, yeah, nobody's been able to identify a cause, and I've been to all the top premier kinds of peeps that you would go to. Okay. And you want me to help you. Great. No pressure, Jen. None at all. Well, I do have this thing that I do called homeopathy. I think I can try that, maybe. Right? I did practice informed consent. I did tell this patient, I've never treated anybody with this, and she said, you know what? You're honest, because really, that drug trial, there are only like a few of us in the country that could participate because nobody has this. So other people that tell me they've treated it, yeah. I know you're honest. That's good. That's what she said to me. I know you're an honest doctor. So I said, but I'm willing to try. You know why? Because the treatments I do, this holistic treatment I do, is not tied to the diagnosis directly, right? It's helpful and useful. I need to understand what's common, but I don't prescribe based on the diagnosis. I prescribe based on what's curious about your case. What's weird? What's unique? And so she said to me, well, I said, what was going on when this happened 10 years ago? She goes, my dad died. I said, okay. She goes, I said, did you grieve? Yeah. What does that mean? That's what I asked her. What does it mean that you grieved? Well, I think I cried at the funeral, and I really miss him. Did you cry the volume in relation to how much you missed him? Probably not. That's what she said. Probably not. Do you still feel sadness about it? deep, deep sadness. Sometimes I feel like I need to cry but can't. Ooh, now we're getting somewhere. And then, as we're talking, I find out she has this history of trauma. Her mom was a narcissist. Her mom locked her in the closet at 5 and did all sorts of and really largely emotional and psychological sorts of abuse, right? Not so much physical, more on the emotional psychological spectrum. Her mom, she had some issues with, her mother had issues with alcohol, if I recall, and kind of, going off on the kids, that sort of thing. So they were always sort of walking on eggshells and trying to basically suppress all their stuff so that mom wouldn't go off on them even more than she already was, right? It was to sort of temper mom's crap, right? So I said to the patient, when you left home at 18, 20, whatever, at that point, did you grieve? Did you cry? Because I know it wasn't safe. When you were little, it wasn't safe. No, I don't think I ever cried about that. Okay, so let me get this straight. So your mother was never really able to be the mother that anybody would need at that point, in childhood, a caring, loving, compassionate kind of mother. She never had those qualities. She basically abused you and wasn't emotionally available because she didn't. It was all about her. Yeah, that's right. But you never got to grieve that. No, I didn't have time. Okay. What about the loss? There were some other deaths that happened in the family. What about those? No, it wasn't safe. That happened when we were at home. That wasn't safe. Okay. What about your dad? Well, yeah, I cried at his funeral. I think I cried for sure the day he died. So what you're telling me is you think you cry. I mean, maybe a couple of times, a few times that week. Yeah, sounds about right. Have you cried since then? I'm still sad about it. Okay. Right? So now I have from my holistic perspective, what appears to be etiology. We have a cause. It looks like this emotional, psychological trauma and grief that really didn't have a place to go, just sort of percolated and flowed down into the blood and turned into a physical, we're just gonna not make neutrophils. Because that's how we're going to express this pathology. Because what ends up happening, I see this pattern quite a bit, where stuff on the emotional, mental, psychological, the mental health plane turns into physical illness if it doesn't have a place to go. So it's gonna go somewhere. It's either gonna have some room and get expressed mentally, emotionally. This is why I firmly believe we have to express it somewhere. Not everybody does that in the same way, but you have to cry, or you have to sob, you have to write it out, you have to get angry, you have to express this stuff somewhere. Otherwise, it's like a volcano. And at some point that lava will flow, it will burst through the Earth's core surface and will burn up whatever's in its path. Maybe that's the neutrophils. And so that's what appeared to be the etiology in this case. So when I thought in terms of how am I going to treat this, and this is where I think naturopathic medicine really shines, is we're not just going to focus on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis. That the problem is kind of outside the axis. Yes, it's the stress, the trauma, the grief that was unexpressed. Yes, that's stress, but ultimately it's not current stress, right? I mean, it is from my perspective, but not through, right, the conventional lens. That's not current. That happened 50 years ago. How could that be the problem? So I gave my patient a treatment, and I said, when I give you this treatment, when I give you this medicine, this homeopathic medicine, I suspect that that the dam is gonna break. That's sort of part of the goal. I hope you're on board with that, because I did try to do informed consent, right? But it's the dam's gonna break, and it's likely, can't guarantee this because everybody's experience is different, but I suspect you're gonna start crying. And it's probably going to feel overwhelming and uncontrollable and pretty intense. And I need you to let it happen. I need you to allow space around it. I need you to just look at it and say, oh, Dr. Jen said this is going to happen, and I'm just going to let it happen. And try to not take it, not push it away, but allow it. Because that's the healing path. Okay, I think she thought I was crazy. Okay. All right. I can do that. Nothing else helped, so might as well try this. This crazy wackadoodle will allow it to happen kind of thing. So she leaves my office. We scheduled a follow-up for, I think, a month out. She's going to get blood drawn in the middle sometime in there, because her hematologist had her, coming in every week or two for a blood draw. So, she comes back to the first follow-up. Right? What's happened since she left my office? She said, I left your office 3 or 4 days later. I walk into the mall because I think my energy, she noticed an uptake in her energy. Like she felt a little like, and she started sleeping better. And she goes, I went into the mall and I saw this mother interacting with her child. And I started sobbing. I started sobbing in the middle of the mall. I found a bench. I sat down and I said, Dr. Jen told me to let this happen, so I'm going to let it happen. She cried. There were lots of grief and tears for, I want to say, upwards of a couple months, maybe 3 months, where it was there was quite a bit of it, but she had a perspective on it, like, I'm going to let this happen. I'm going to allow this. This is part of the problem, that I'm not allowing this, or haven't allowed this in the past. And in the meantime, she starts to see an uptick in her blood levels. Her neutrophils start to go up. And then she starts to not have insomnia. She's actually sleeping 8, 9 hours straight a night, unless the dog wakes her up. She's actually waking up where she has energy. And she now gets to the mid-afternoon, before she feels like she needs a nap. And then we saw that push out. And then it was, I had friends from a different state come to visit, and they stayed up way too late. I was like up till 1 with them. Dr. Jen, I haven't done that in 15 years. Right? And where was the poison? Right? Where was the poison? Was it in the blood? Was that the problem? No. The problem was not in the blood. The problem was outside the blood. The problem was partly due to, probably, I mean, I'm guessing at this point because we can't say these things with certainty, but what I can tell you is I've seen these sorts of patterns emerge holistically on a regular basis, where things that are affecting the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So if you have a chronic stressor like a narcissistic mother or a grief, and in this case it was the narcissistic mother, it was the trauma from that, the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse, then griefs on top of that, of people dying and loss, and none of that having a place to flow, right? There was no river for that trough. There was no river running through it for that junk to drain, right? We just had the junk piling up. And in that scenario, then it has to go somewhere. It's going to go, it's like the whack-a-mole, right? You've done the whack-a-mole at the fair where you try to hit it, and then another mole pops up, right? You hit one down, another one pops up. It's the same idea. If you suppress, we know this principle, honestly, in naturopathic medicine. If you suppress illness on one plane and it has nowhere else to go, it will come up somewhere else. Pretty much guaranteed. So you have the kid with the dermatitis, the ectopic dermatitis, eczema, whatever. It gets suppressed with hydrocortisone cream. What happens a year later? Oh, the kid gets asthma, right? The disease is like pushed to a different spot. Now it's going to happen on the asthma plane. Now it's going to happen on the lungs plane. Because, you might need your skin to live, but lungs, we'll just drive it there. And this is the problem with conventional medicine in general, is that ultimately suppression doesn't work. Suppression doesn't work on a mental emotional level. I mean, the therapists and the life coaches and the counselors, they know this, right? What you suppress persists or grows larger. It gets bigger. It turns into a gigantic, now it has energy like a ball of lava, right? And it's going to explode, right? I've had that experience myself. And that is the same thing. That same thing can happen and cross over from something mental emotional to something physical. Okay, so get back to the story of the case, right? The chronic idiopathic neutropenia case. What happened with this patient was, in going back to basically the root problem, right? The stressor that was throwing off the HPA axis that ultimately threw off the white blood cells, because that was probably all secondary. In addressing that and getting this patient to start to deal with the grief, her levels started coming up, right? I've treated this patient, I think it was 2 years ago, basically. 2 years ago that I took the case. And blood levels, right? They were 200 to 300, and they had been for a while. Pretty much chronically 8+ years. they'd been up a little with the drug trial. This patient, the labs I got sent were 2,400. That's in the normal range. And I'm sad, but I no longer get to talk to her as often because, well, I worked myself out of a job. Damn it. You cure somebody, you work yourself out of a job. That therein, my friend, is the problem. So, all that to say, I think this case really illustrates why it's best to think outside the HPA box, right? Think outside, keep going broader, because very often when you can't solve a problem, when you can't find the solution to what's happening, if you think broader, you're going to see a little more what's going on. And then you're going to be able to fix it. So, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all your support, all your likes, all your subscriptions. And I'll be back to do some more. Thanks for tuning in.